I've got to share with you a couple of quick stories to get the program rolling today. Just a quick note. Uh, Second hour of the show today is going to be devoted to a lot of talk about the Christmas holiday and culturally how we deal with that and issues you may have that come up when you're terribly stressed this time of year. And we have a very special guest joining us in the next hour, Pastor Paul Thompson from Eastside Baptist Church here in Twin Falls. I'd like to tell people he is much like a radio counselor. That is, he's like an advice columnist. He gives great advice. He's very thoughtful. And we've had him on the air before, and I'm really looking forward to having him join us in an hour or so on the program. So if you'd like to hear that, and you know people who'd like to hear it too as well, who might not have the radio on right now, please alert them that that's coming up in hour number two of Top Story today. However, a couple of things I wanted to open up with, which I think are, I hope they're not reflective of a growing trend in this community. And I got thinking about this today after I saw a story in the Times News. And the headline on the website was Twin Falls Judge, Violence, Racial Tension at Boiling Point in Country and Magic Valley. And that comes from Judge Richard Bevan, who some of you have obviously known him for many, many years, and he's got a great reputation in this community from a legal standpoint. And there was a story a few months ago, you may remember this, about a young man who got involved in a road rage. He let his emotions get out of hand, and he ended up getting into a spat with a Muslim man, and apparently made a threat, and sharp objects were waved, and this is we have to realize that yes, there are tensions in this community. We also have to realize that there are legitimate concerns about people who are coming here to this community, but don't be an idiot. Because when you're a dummy like this young man was, you make so many of us who might have legitimate and logical concerns, you make us look really, really bad. And then you have liberals out there who try to tar every one of us with the same brush. It's like when I sometimes tongue in cheek on the air refer to the Democrats as Marxist Leninists. I realize that not all of them are, but it's some. But you have to realize there are people on the other side who are doing this, and they're not doing it tongue in cheek. They're doing it because they seriously believe it. And then some nitwit goes out and gives them all the ammunition they may need, at least for the next several months, when something like this happens. Now, I also want to mention something somebody told me over the weekend. There happened to be a band that was playing at a local tavern here in the city of Twin Falls, and an acquaintance of mine, I know through the Republican Party, she's been active in the Republican Party here for quite some time. She had decided to go to this tavern because a friend of hers plays in the band, and she wanted to see the band perform. And when she got to the place, it turned out apparently that earlier in the evening there had been a fight, and it had involved some Hispanic men and some of the regular bar patrons, who I guess we could best describe as Anglo. I know that that's an oversimplification too, and describing everybody that way is a bit of a stretch as well, but it tells you that likely some of the native English speakers were not getting along with some of these other people at the bar. Well, it ended, and I'm told, and I don't have access to any police reports or anything else, but this is the description she shared with me. The Hispanic men left, but then returned with carloads of friends later. And a huge brawl then took place, and it spilled out into the streets. People got hurt. Now, nobody apparently seriously hurt, but people are battered and bruised. And it got very nasty. And then she was telling me that some of the Hispanic men had tattoos on their faces. Now, the immediate assumption you might jump to is, all right, gang members, because that might be a sign that the tattoos of a gang membership. And you know what? Possibly it is. But here's the thing. I was doing my little pregame show on Facebook a few minutes ago, and I mentioned this. When I was a college student way back in the previous century, 30 some odd years ago, early 1980s, for a time I had debated becoming a lawyer. Uh, and today I still don't know if I should have gone that direction or not. I guess you could make arguments yes and no. But I actually had been in pre law for a while, and in one of my logic classes, I'll never forget a lesson we learned. And it might sound kind of simple when you first hear it, like you're in elementary school or See Spot Run, but you have to think creatively about what they're talking about and then branch out from there. The professor, I think his name was Malin Ramage, he, it's funny how some of these things still stick in your head. Well, you wouldn't forget a name like that. He ended up putting up a photograph of a large red Ford. And he said, "All right, this is a red car." You see the red car for the very first time. Do you make an assumption at that point that all red cars then are Fords and that all red cars are large? You might, because it's the first time you've ever seen one. However, if you spend some time looking into this, you'll discover that some Chevys are red, some Dodges are red, some Hondas and Toyotas are red. Some red cars are small cars, some are mid-sized cars, some red pickup trucks too. So they're not really cars. I mean, they say locomotion, obviously, but they're not all the same. So you can't definitively say that. And I threw into this mix, if you go to my our website today, newsradio1310.com, I have a piece up about this story I'm sharing with you right now. That same period of my life, I was a young man, and it was summertime, and I didn't go to college in the summer. And I was back home, and I was sitting at a neighborhood tavern in my hometown, just chatting with a few friends. And there was this big horseshoe bar you'd all sit around, and the woman behind the bar was a very nice. I went to school with her grandchildren. She was a very nice woman. My family had been friends with this woman and her family for years and years and years. And while I was there, a motorcycle gang pulled up outside, and then the bikers came in, and they all ordered drinks, and they were just chatting amongst themselves. But this isn't the Wild Bunch. These are not a bunch of guys, or the Wild Ones, whatever it was called in the movie. They're not pulling into town and harassing people and smashing up the joint. They were just standing there chatting with themselves when all of a sudden some of the guys I knew, they weren't friends, but I knew that I'd grown up with, who were sitting on the other side of the horseshoe, started lipping off to the biker gang. The next thing I know, everyone's pouring into the street, and they're all brawling in the street. And I got up thinking, well, it's my hometown. I guess I should go out there as one of the guys. And the woman, Ruthie, behind the bar, she grabbed me and handed me a quarter, and she said, "You don't fight." But then she said, pointed at the payphone nearby and said, "Call the police." So I did. And by the time the police arrived, the brawl had broken up. Now, you could look at that, and likely what happened was people saw a motorcycle gang and thought, danger, danger, danger. But this past summer, I happened to be in Fairfield, and I stopped at the diner there, and I decided to go in and get something to eat. And as I was pulling in, a motorcycle gang pulled in. And they all had the chaps on and the leather vests and the coal scuttle helmets. Could look quite intimidating, except for on their backs, they all had crucifixes, that is, crosses on their backs. And they all walked inside and they ordered ice cream. It was a Christian motorcycle gang. The only fight they may ever be involved with, if the Crusades come around again, perhaps they would take up the cross for that reason and take up the fight for that reason. But you understand, just because somebody's in a bar and they have a tattoo doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad guy. I don't know how that brawl got started at that local tavern Saturday night, but I do feel sometimes that we think we have to suddenly take action on our own. In other words, I'm going to ensure that there's no MS-13 in town because nobody else will. Well, you're creating more problems if that's what you've got in mind. And as I say, I don't know how it got started, what caused it to start. Probably when you get drilled deep down in, nobody there really can give you a straight answer. And so that may be the reason that this, but the judge isn't far off the mark. Yes, people are angry out there. But what we have to do with our anger, instead of going out into the streets with chains and knives and throwing fists, is we've got to channel that. We have to double down and work harder at convincing the political class we want better checks and balances. Number one, we're likely going to get that with immigration with the new president. People think that he's not deadly serious about some of his earlier promises, but when he was in Wisconsin the other night, he said, no, nothing's changed. I'm going to go ahead with my plans. And I think Congress is with me. Here's Paul Ryan, and Paul Ryan's nodding his head yes. And also, we'll have greater vetting of refugees who are coming into this country. Let that work, and let that permeate its way down through the system. Because otherwise, we're going to end up with a race war in this country. And I don't know that that's anything we ultimately want, because what happens is, again, somebody who might have a tattoo will be considered, it's not synonymous with a gang membership. It can be. But like I said earlier, not all red cars are Fords. Some are Chevys, Dodges, and Hondas. So you have to be aware of that in these situations, and don't let your emotions rule your actions. Having said that, It's not just race war we're worried about. It's also, I think, in this country right now, potentially. I read this comment online the other day, and I think I mentioned it yesterday. There was a post over the weekend somebody put up on my Facebook pages, one of my connections, and I happened to see it, and it was about how you've got a lot of pressure on the people in the Electoral College to abandon Donald Trump. They're voting next week to certify the election. And the writer said, if that happens, this is not going to be like Samuel Tilden losing way back in the 1800s to Rutherford B. Hayes. The writer came right out and said, the mood of this country right now will lead to civil war. Yesterday, a very nice fellow I know, I used to work with his wife. She was the business manager at my old radio station, my last radio station. He mentioned on Facebook, he had just posted something where he said, go Trump and Happy New Year. That's all he said. Now, the thing with Facebook, which claims to be very self-righteous, is that when you post something, only your friends see it. But as soon as your friends comment on it, then all of their connections see it, even if those aren't your connections. And that's how you get all of the potty-mouthed liberals who then start chiming in. And somebody threatened Don and threatened him because he made that comment. Now, I don't know about you, but if they're trying to get something started along these lines, first of all, liberals are going to bring lattes to the fight. I'm going to be bringing Smith and Wesson. So I don't think it's going to be a long fight. But they somehow believe that they're going to force the Electoral College into making this decision. And by making that decision, somehow believe that the rest of us are simply going to go along with it. In other words, we coastal elites are going to rule over you who live in flyover country from now through eternity. And you have no choice in the matter because these thugs have gotten everything they've wanted over the past decade when it comes to the culture wars. And they simply, now they're emboldened and they believe they can do anything they please, no matter how unconstitutional it would happen to be. The latest is a group of Hollywood stars, these talking pustules. Martin Sheen among them. He played a president on TV, urging the Electoral College to dump Trump. I'd like to share a little bit of that with you if I can following the break. We've got a break coming up shortly. Also, California is still making noises about seceding from the Union. At this point, I don't know how much more we could do to help them. If they need a push, I'll be glad to give it to them. If they want to go, fine. But they've got to leave it up to the people in that state, county by county, and maybe community by community. Because some of them don't want to go and live in the People's Republic. They'd like to remain part of the United States. I've got more on that coming up in a few minutes. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. It's 35. That means some of the ice should be melting off. Coming into work this morning, let me just tell you, it was a little bit dicey in spots. An old program director once told me, he said, don't let that music keep playing. The bumper music is just there to get you back into the show. And that long pause there was because I was stepping. I didn't realize it. I had a foot on the cord to my headset, and I couldn't pull my headset back up in time. It happens. It's live radio. 822, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 35. Hey, I got to remind you, because a lot of people are thinking, what am I going to do after the holiday, Christmas holiday in a couple of weeks, after I've been eating all of those pies and all of those delicious candies and cookies everybody's been putting out? Have I got a solution for you? It's called the Total Body Transformation System. And I've been a convert to this just simply because of the results. And I remember when I first got involved with it in late September, I lost 18 pounds in my first 11 days. Then the weight loss slowed after that, but that's actually better. It's healthier that way, slow to lose it more steadily and slowly. But 52 pounds in the first 2.5 months is what I ended up dropping. And the average person who was actually using the Total Body Transformation System will lose 22 pounds over 60 days. Now, this was developed by a company, leading nutritional company, I should mention. It's not somebody, who's out there producing motor oil or washing machines, but it's a nutritional company. This is the expertise, and it has an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau. It's also got recommendations from scientists at some of the leading universities in the country, Tufts, Cornell, and Columbia being among those. It has been awarded 2 U.S. patents, one for reducing waist circumference and the other for increasing metabolic rate and weight control. I also want to mention it's some of that the replacements that I have for some of the meals are actually healthier than some of the meals I was eating. So you're not going to be putting anything into your body that your body doesn't like. It's very good for you. And you can also still eat a healthy amount of calories. So it's a sustainable diet as far as that goes. And I wanted to mention as well um, that there's a money back guarantee if you're interested. People have been asking me about the cost, and I pretty much came right out and said it. When you go along with the replacement, the replacement is actually runs about the same as the groceries you are replacing. So there's no real it's zero sum game. There's no loss on your part. You'd be spending the money on groceries anyway. And I got turned on to this by Don Chandler right here in Twin Falls. Don lost 50 pounds himself on the diet. He didn't need to lose much more than that. I still have some work to do. But his telephone number, if you'd like to reach him, he's at 208 731 3560. That's 208 731 3560. And you know what? I don't walk around hungry, which is, I think, the best part of all of this. I was mentioning these Hollywood types who are trying to force the hands. There's a story this morning on Drudge. I happen to see it. It's a link on Drudge, and it shares that what's happening right now is the people in the Electoral College. Now, we heard Idaho was the first place we started hearing these stories. The electors here being threatened by some of the knuckle dragging leftists out there, the folks out there who don't have any what you might call cultural or social skills. And now, an elector, I think in New Mexico, somebody told her, I forgot where it was, Texas, I guess. Somebody told her in an email that she should put a gun in her mouth and blow her head off if she votes for Donald Trump. So it is getting a little dicey out there because Lefty realizes Lefty can't get everything he or she wants. And now it's spread to Hollywood. These talking pustules, led by Martin Sheen, yes, he's not the president, but he played one on TV. I'm going to give you a smidgen of this. Some of the leading Hollywood stars of today telling us, well, they were leading stars, I guess, telling us and telling the Electoral College to throw the election to Hillary Clinton.
Republican members of the Electoral College, this message is for you. As you know, our founding fathers built the Electoral College to safeguard the American people from the dangers of a demagogue and to ensure that the presidency only goes to someone who is to an eminent degree endowed with the requisite qualifications.
An eminent degree. Someone who is highly qualified for the job.
The Electoral College was created specifically to prevent an unfit candidate from becoming president.
There are 538 members of the Electoral College. You
and just 36 other conscientious Republican electors can make a difference
by voting your conscience on December 19th.
And thereby shaping the future of our nation.
Well, golly gee, that changed my mind. Eminently qualified. Can we bring up the fact that the woman who was running on the Democrat line, that she had a homebrew server while she was Secretary of State, and people all over the world were able to hack in and read all of her sensitive emails? Can we also mention that she got 4 Americans butchered at Benghazi, Libya? And she's eminently qualified? Excuse me? The other guy who's going to be the president, he ended up building a huge business empire and entertainment empire as well. So he actually did something in the real world, unlike her, who just happened to be married to somebody who was already famous. And yet they're telling us we have to do this or else. Now, it gets kookier. California is threatening to leave the union. I know, good riddance, but California's talking about it, and Tucker Carlson had a fellow on his show last night on Fox News Channel, Marcus Ruiz Evans, from the California secession movement known as Yes California. I guess yes means yes, and no means no, something like that. But they're talking a little bit about this movement, and Carlson seems to nail him on a couple of points.
I guess in reading your materials, you say that basically it's an ideological move. This has accelerated since the election of Trump. California did not vote for Trump. That's an understatement. And you guys want to move out and make it a kind of liberal utopia. Immigration is one of the issues that you mentioned. Would you open the border, your southern border with Mexico, wide and let all of Central America, to the extent it already hasn't, move to California? Would you have any closed border at all? And if so, why?
Every nation has to have borders and border controls and a functioning border. Yes, California wants a more open immigration system and a working immigration system. And the fact is that when we're talking about border controls, who's in charge of immigration? Who's in charge of the visas? Who's in charge of the border? Who has always been in charge of those things? The federal government, and they've totally failed. The fact is that the federal government hasn't done comprehensive.
No, that's true, it hasn't, but California does encourage people to come by issuing, for example, driver's license for illegal immigrants, among other things. But one of the results of massive immigration into California is, when I was growing up, it was the richest state, and now it has more poverty than any state. Almost a third of the state is in poverty. LA is the poorest big city in America. If you were to let millions and millions more of low-skilled laborers come into the state, how would it get richer?
Tucker Carlson, by the way, was born in San Francisco, and then his father was a television news anchor in San Diego for many, many years. So uh, California is his home state. So he's referencing how it has gone from being richest to one of the poorest in just a little under a generation. And that's because it's been run by such a, well, you've got the old dope smoking hippie in charge of the state right now. And I mean, he obviously is completely out to lunch. A couple of points on all of this. When we talk about vetting refugees, because when they do secede and create their socialist paradise, you are going to be seeing people who are going to be fleeing that country quickly to get away from it. Especially even those many who back it in the beginning will have what do you call an epiphany at some point. Are we ready for them to start coming here by the thousands to the Magic Valley? Because that's what's going to happen when they discover what a huge mistake it was to go down that road. It will save us a lot of money, on the other hand, in the long run, because, well, that's 20 million fewer welfare payments every month. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. It's 34. Coming up in the next hour of the program, Pastor Paul Thompson